the United States declared Venezuela a national security threat in order to impose sanctions against 7 officials in the world's bilateral diplomatic disputes since President Nicolás Maduro took office in 2013. US President Barack Obama signed and issued an executive order which senior administration officials said did not target the Venezuela energy sector or the broader economy or the citizens. But the move creates more tensions between Washington and Caracas, just as U.S. relationship with Cuba, a longtime U.S. enemy in Latin America, but now is very, very close to Venezuela. They're trying to normalize ties. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro denounced the sanctions as an attempt to topple his government, and this is the quote: "President Barack Obama has personally decided to take on the task of defeating my government and intervening in Venezuela to control it." Recently, Venezuela has ordered to downgrade the embassy from 100 employees to 17, Nick, and this immediately set off a chain reaction of things that are now in this situation where we are declaring Venezuela national threat. What do you think?
Unfortunately, it kind of reminds me of two little kids arguing, the U.S. and Venezuela. I don't think one person is right, one person's wrong, but sometimes I feel like President Maduro is kind of living in Chavez's shadow, and his popularity, if you can even call it that, was kind of associated with his close relation to Chavez. So he feels naturally that because Chavez was always condemning the U.S., that he has to do it too. Like, well, that's just what you guys liked, so I'm going to keep doing it. There's no reason why these two countries cannot, work side by side, because there's no religious divide. There's no real reason why they should really hate each other.
And we have a very strong link with our oil trade.
Exactly.
It's very important. But what you're saying is very important, because this situation, yes, we're imposing sanctions on 7 individuals that are part of the government. We're not imposing sanctions on the country. We're not imposing sanctions on the citizens. But just like we did with Iran and Syria, declaring Venezuela as a threat allows for these sanctions to be imposed as a political game. The White House said that they targeted people whose actions undermine democratic processes and institutions, or that they committed acts of violence against human rights or the opposition, and that they somehow penalize freedom of speech. We've seen that Maduro, his popularity in Venezuela has going down and down, but this situation now has allowed him something really special to happen. Now he can rally the country around him with this idea of imperialistic invasion from the U.S.
But how long is that going to last? You have not a lot of food on the shelves, long lines, people waiting to get food from the government. They're going to be pissed. And using the U.S. as imperialists to justify all that, it's not going to take you very far, And it's like, he can use that as an excuse, but ultimately he has bigger problems on his hands. And instead of
the price of oil is really hurting Venezuela right now. We are one of the main, importers of Venezuela oil. At some point, we were 40% of the business for Venezuela. And I want to say the quote of Josh Earnest, the White House spokesman. He says, "We are deeply concerned by the Venezuelan government's effort to escalate intimidation of its political opponents. Venezuelan officials, past and present, who violate the human rights of Venezuelan citizens and engage in acts of public corruption will not be welcome here, and we now have the tools to block their assets and their use of the U.S. financial systems." So this is more of a political statement than trying to impose any change of government or change of policy within Venezuela.
That's what I'm saying. It's like two little kids arguing, in my opinion. He said, she said, and it's like, well, how long is it going to last before they both realize that no one's going to benefit from this at all? Especially who has more to gain here? Because it's not the U.S. It's definitely Venezuela. They have much more to lose and to gain from their relations with the U.S.
Here's the thing is that the rhetoric that Maduro has is that they can always accuse the U.S. from what's going on at home. And this gives him more ammo to do so. But the reality is that there's other bigger internal conflicts in Venezuela that have the country in the situation that it is. So we want to know what you think. Do you think that these sanctions to some of the members of the government in Venezuela are going to actually make some change for the Venezuelan citizen? Or is this just some political you said, I said? Let us know what you think in the comments and subscribe to the Lib TV.